Now, dyslexia is a learning difference that affects, hopefully an easier one. We've got reading and spelling or numeracy. So which one does it primarily affect? Ooh, mostly, yeah. So reading and spelling. Now, obviously, dyslexia is a little bit more than just reading and spelling, but those are the primary things. To give you guys a bit of context, because this is edutainment, it's about seeing the information and the way your brain interprets it. So it's that little bit in between. It's not about intelligence. It's about how the brain is processing and kind of like sorting it. So when you learn in a way which works for your brain, it's not going to have any issues with the comprehension. That's why it really isn't about like IQ. All right, well done, guys. Cool. Rosanna was fastest on that. All right, 2 of 22. Which American TV friend star has dyslexia? And hopefully it will load the theme tune in time. So is it Monica? Is it Phoebe? Is it Rachel? Or is it Joey? Oh, okay, interesting mix here. So actually, none of you got it right. It was actually Rachel, so Jennifer Aniston, is the dyslexic. And I find it really interesting because there's a lot of people who are female actors or presenters who have dyslexia. So Holly Willoughby, Oprah Winfrey, the person from Sister Act, Whoopi Goldberg. And it's because like they might not be very good at kind of like remembering the words per se, but the way they kind of like the words come out, it tends to feel a lot more freer, more natural. So in that sense, it can actually be a big advantage. Yes, and we all have women on the quiz apart from me, but yeah. The percentage of people with dyslexia in the UK. So how many people in the UK do you think have dyslexia? Nice, 10%. Now, 10% is often thrown around all the time. What does that actually mean? So 10% is what we believe to be the dyslexic population. We could have, there's probably way more, but it equates to about 6.3 million people. 6.3 million, that's a decent percentage. Oh, and we've got a new attendee, Jace Fair. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but welcome. All you got to do is go to kahoot.it and put in the code on the top of the screen, which is 58539, and you can join along. But the global average is actually higher, and a lot of people sadly get undiagnosed. But thankfully, under the Equality Act 2010, even if you resonate with it and you consider yourself to have a disability, which dyslexia technically is, you are covered. Oh, nice, overtaken there. In it to win it. Okay, number 4. Dyslexia commonly runs in families. Is this true or false? So is it hereditary? Oh, interesting. True, yes. So it is hereditary. So if your mama or your papa have it, there's a high likelihood that you may have it, but it can skip generations. So if you think, you know, all right, so if you think you're incredibly dyslexic, but your parents are not, that doesn't necessarily mean it isn't in the family. It can be what we call like a dormant gene. So it just kind of like chills in the background, waiting to appear. And it also means that if you're dyslexic and you have children, they won't necessarily have dyslexia. And I think that's good to know. But it means you can also have dyslexia and have no family history as well. So that's also important to tell. So you can't blame everything on your family. Rising up. All right, nice. Dyslexics tend to be more curious, creative, and intuitive than average. Now, obviously, I helped create this, so I want to big up the dyslexics. But yeah, keep guys get true. Yeah. Now, what I'd be interested to know, do you guys think dyslexic people are more creative, curious, and outgoing in certain areas than others because that is part of what is dyslexia? Or is it because, you know, life being a pain in the arse, if you think differently, it allows you to create a different set of like resilient skill sets? I mean, maybe we'll call that a rhetorical question. It's fine. uh, I think it's probably a combination of both, in fairness. Like, people with dyslexia aren't inherently creative, but if you really struggle with more like an academic approach or writing or reading, you naturally will gravitate towards a different way of learning. So I reckon that's probably more accurate of why when people say, oh, you're dyslexic, you must like painting. Nah, you could be in any sector and still be dyslexic. It's just people tend to go to creative route because it's less of like a struggle in terms of how their brain works. All right, nice. Rue, doing really well. Okay, number 6. People with dyslexia, how do we experience this? Yeah, a person with only dyslexia may experience the following, except. So which one do they not? Yes, thanks. More resilient, think in a different way. Difficulty following instructions. Nice. Now, this one I want to talk about a bit further because I think it's quite interesting. A person with only dyslexia may experience the following, except. So does someone with dyslexia have difficulty with spelling? Yeah. Do they have problems understanding what they hear? You can tell a dyslexic wrote this. Or difficulty in finding the right words? Absolutely. But difficulty following instructions. Now, I would argue that dyslexic people absolutely do struggle following instructions. But the thing about this is that if you have dyslexia, you're twice as likely than the average population to have another condition. So it's called co-occurring. So if you have dyslexia, you're twice as likely to also have dyspraxia or ADHD or autism, because you've got to stop thinking of it as like kind of separate things. It's actually like one big old spectrum. And with that in mind, when we're saying difficulty in following instructions, that is a typical characteristic of dyspraxia, which is like dyslexia, same outcomes, but different way in terms of how the brain gets to that. So as we mentioned, dyslexia is not knowing the information, the brain processing it and it coming out wrong. Dyspraxia is more about having the information and the brain interpreting it wrong. But at the end of the day, it looks the same. And this is why a lot of people get diagnosed incorrectly. Nice, like everyone's moving around in this. Yasso was fastest on the one on that. All right, which billionaire is not dyslexic? So a billionaire that is not. Is it Warren Buffett, who is a big old investor, Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, Steve Jobs, the Apple guru, or Jeff Bezos, the evil genius who runs Amazon? Very well, guys. So the one who isn't is Jeff Bezos. Now, Warren Buffett, who is a real big-time investor, he dropped out of school, you know, classic rags to riches and overcame it. His different way of thinking didn't hinder him, but actually allowed him to see numbers in a different way. And this is interesting because just because you're dyslexic doesn't mean you're necessarily bad at numbers. It just means that you have to think about numbers and written words in a different way. You could call that dyscalculia, but a lot of the kind of conditions kind of overlap. Bill Gates now isn't officially known or diagnosed as dyslexic, but he resonates. He said, you know what, pretty certain I'm dyslexic. And he also has resonated with a lot of things on the autistic spectrum. And that's because his actual social skills apparently were like really poor, but he's got these like blinkers and he can really focus on certain areas. So great for him. Steve Jobs, out and proud, dyslexic. Jeff Bezos, if you guys know him, he's like the guy with the bald head who is ridiculously rich, but not that nice. He's not part of the group. No, he can't sit with us. All right, many individuals with dyslexia see things three-dimensionally. Is that true or false? Three-dimensionally, I'll explain what that is in a moment. But can, 3D space, good spatial awareness. If I asked you to picture what a cube looks like, is that something you could do? Now, the answer is true, and I see most of you put false. Now, I'll try to explain a little bit more what this is, because this was always a term of when you type in, what are the positives of dyslexia? Oh, good spatial awareness, 3D, what does that mean? Well, what it means is, if you close your eyes and I ask you to think of a dinosaur, you might be able to like picture the shape and kind of like rotate it in your head. So it's quite easy to picture something and like manipulate it. With that in mind, dyslexics may potentially dream more vividly than others. And if I said, picture a number line in your head of 1 to 10, you may be able to do that. Being able to work up the maths on top of it, however, maybe not. So thinking three-dimensionally is also what you call thinking outside of the box. If there's a problem, I don't know, like how do you put out a fire and there's a bucket of water, a non-three-dimensional thinker might just say, get the water put over the fire. But a three-dimensional one will say, well, I'm just going to nip across the road, get a big old fire blanket, come and put it over. So it's coming up with a solution which on first appearance isn't even there. That's kind of like three-dimensional thinking. Cool, we're consistently on that one. Which male sports star is dyslexic? Now, this one's a bit harder because you've actually got to know who the people are. But we've got Magic Johnson, Kobe Bryant, Andre Agassi, or Tiger Woods. And that is how you pronounce their names, by the way. So which one is dyslexic? Oh, both answers. Do you know what? Tiger Woods actually isn't correct, but you've got a point anyway. So yeah, it's Magic Johnson, and he's a basketball player. One of the best, actually. I would say he's as good as Michael Jordan, but maybe just like a slight less. He was in the Globetrotters. The way he kind of got around problems, he used basketball as an escape. And that's quite interesting because, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of people with dyslexia also have dyspraxia, and dyspraxia can also affect coordination. But Magic here seemingly did not have dyspraxia, as far as I'm aware, and he was great at sports. So just because you have dyslexia and you're more likely to have something else doesn't mean that you can. If there is such a thing as pure dyslexia, like that would be an example. Tiger Woods, I don't know how he got that, but whoever picked him, good on you. You've got a fake point. Oh, nice. Very consistent. Ruse in the win. Then we're, yes. Oh, Jay did make it. Okay, well, admittedly, you started a lot later, Jay, so no hard feelings. We'll give you like 1,000 bonus points. All right, the first description of dyslexia appeared in 1896 by who? Was it Gregor, Mr. Pringle, Alfred, or Alexander Fleming? interesting. Everyone went with Gregor Mendel. Sorry about my pronunciation, but it was Mr. Pringle, Dr. Pringle. And what I think really interesting is that our definition and understanding of dyslexia has changed so much over the years. If you go originally look at, for instance, autism, it has been around for hundreds of years, but we used to think it was about seizures and fits and schizophrenia and having like a mental disorder like health. Dyslexia was always kind of seen as, you know, writing, kind of like stammering, but then over time it has changed. I think we've gone from thinking of it as a disability to a difference, and that is like a transaction that's happening over time. But it's only, I would say, since, I don't know, late 90s or early 90s, where it's starting to really pick up momentum, where people are really recognizing it. And what that translates to, as Rose, you mentioned, your work colleagues, everyone's probably heard of dyslexia, but very few people know what dyslexia is. And that is a problem, because if you think you know what something is, and you do not know what it is, you're going to have these negative biases and these different ways of thinking. So what is dyslexia? Well, it's not being able to read and write. Can you do this job? Well, it involves reading and writing, so no. And it means you're less likely to get a promotion, you know, get your foot on the ladder. And this is why it's really important to be able to explain it to yourself. Rather than expecting managers and HR people to have a good understanding, you kind of have to learn yourself and not just do it from a negative perspective. Go to someone with a solution, not a problem, and you'll always get better results. Nice. If I'm going to guess, Rose, I'm guessing do you work in diversity and inclusion? Or just, no, just hot on your dyslexia facts. That's what we like to see. Okay, true or false? Most dyslexics often have a weaker sense of spatial relationships and better use of the right brain. Now, this might slightly contradict what I said previously, but again, we'll go into why that might be. So it's false. Now, why it's most dyslexics have a weaker sense of spatial relationships and a better use of the right brain. So it actually does back up. So spatial environment, this is like around you, and you're not bumping into things. You still have an awareness of your space and your surroundings. Again, that characteristic is more closely aligned with things like dyspraxia, which is, again, nearly as common as dyslexia, but hardly anyone knows what it is. And use of the right brain, they say dyslexia is more of the left brain. Now, whether you believe in right brain, left brain thinking is it's a very simple way of talking about things. People often say, dyslexics, autistics, artists, creative people, that's very left brain thinking. There's been a lot of research that says it's not quite as accurate because the brain is, you know, working all over the place, but different like neurons and connections do kind of like light up a little bit more in the left side. This is why you might be really good at drawing pictures, but your handwriting is god awful, like no one can read it. And if you think about it, it shouldn't be so different. You know, writing and drawing is the kind of same movements, but the brain is processing it from two different sections. And if you have stronger connections in one, just like you might have stronger muscles in the other, just showing off there, it makes sense why one part of the brain will be quicker at processing information than the other. All right, guys, we're doing really good. We're smashing through these. All right, 12 or 22. Which female sports star is dyslexic? And I'm afraid you're on your own here because I am not a sports person. But we've got Simone, Serena, Rachel, or Fran. Be honest with you, I only know who one of them are, but It is Rachel. Now, in the comments, bonus points, do any of you know what sport she is part of? Or was that just like a lucky guess? Oh no, no one got it right, so... Well, we'll call that extra homework. Okay. Dyslexia is a localized weakness within the module of the brain. So this is a very technical way of explaining it, not how I would explain it, but precision, phonological, systematic, neurological. Brilliant. All of you got that right? Well, no, most of you got that right. And phonological. And that's more about like is how the brain is processing sounds. The others are all like other ways. It doesn't matter too much. Like if you're explaining it to the average person, how dyslexia works shouldn't really matter. But officially it is considered a weakness because it means that there's part of it isn't functioning to the same level that the typical population is. However, I don't like that way of thinking because what it means is if one area is weaker, another area typically picks up the slack and ends up being higher. So one of the other three options, you might actually have higher levels than the average population. A good way of thinking about this is that if you're blind, you are normally better at hearing. Now, it's not that your ears are better, but you've just become more attuned of being able to hear and your brain puts more focus on like the different sounds. And the exact same thing is true with dyslexia, where one thing has a deficit, another thing has a overstrength. Jay, where are you? Okay, 14. Which of these famous people are not dyslexic? Okay, so which one isn't? Is it Mission Impossible's Tom Cruise, Mickey Mouse's best friend Walt Disney, Baby, Justin Bieber, or Eggman? So yeah, well done guys, it is Justin Bieber. He has some issues, but I think it's just being a bit immature. But Tom Cruise is dyslexic and he is very outspoken about it. And he comes up with a lot of his lines himself. Walt Disney is a very creative thinker. He would actually do the drawings and he'd pass all the writings on to other members of the team. So he was a great case of being an exceptional delegator. If you think about it, I think Matt Groening is also dyslexic. A lot of famous animators are. Like they will come up with the initial ideas, but then they pass those ideas on to other people. So if you think Matt Groening from The Simpsons basically does not much, but he still gets all the credit because he was the innovative person who sparked it. And Jim Carrey, if you guys ever watched Dumber or Dumber or Pet Detective, he is really funny. And a lot of that comes from his own mind. And I think dyslexics as actors and presenters, as said, they are far better at ad-libbing and just going for it. Yasota said, I think I may have ADHD. I do think if you've got one, the likelihood of having similarities or characteristics of all the others is a lot higher. Ooh, Yaso, you're now leading the way. The word dyslexia is derived from word. So what origin? Is it a Latin word or a Greek word? Bam, you guys were on that, but on it wrong. So Greek. Now, to break it apart, dyslexia is more about like reading. That's kind of all it really translates to. And yeah, it's a Greek word, not Latin. It's kind of good to know how words are broken apart and what its true or original meaning was and how it's changed over time. All right. Which Beatle was thought to be dyslexic? Now, I'm a massive Beatles fan, so think carefully before you get the answer. Was it Lennon? Was it McCartney? Was it Harrison? Or was it Starr? Oh, very broad. No one thought Paul was, but we've got everyone was very mixed. It is John Lennon. John Lennon was a very auditory learner. He learnt through sounds and feelings, and he hardly wrote down any of his amazing songs. But his way of thinking creates songs like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, where Paul McCartney, who wrote the other songs, was far more kind of like melodies, which require a more kind of processed way of like putting music together. But why I love the Beatles as a great example of working together. John Lennon, good on his own. Paul McCartney, good on his own. Together, amazing. And they were amazing because they had two different ways of thinking joined together, which made them what they are today. George and Ringo, no one really talks about them. Never mind. Cool, Rosanna managed to get a few more points on that one. Dyslexia is related to low intelligence. Hopefully no one gets this one wrong, considering everything we've been talking about. False. This cannot be overstated. Everyone thinks dyslexia is related to intelligence. But let's go into that a bit more. Okay, on the basic answer is no. However, are there a lot of people who have learning deficit, which are also dyslexic? Yes. And I think we can't get around that. But you've got severe dyslexia, and then you've kind of got, you know, your bog standard average dyslexia. Now, your working population, I would say, and ones you meet in university, all are, you know, your average dyslexia, which is just as much of a part of your life, but it's not the type of population we're talking about that have learning deficits or difficulties. The amount of people who are illiterate, which means cannot read, with dyslexia is so small. It's like 1%. So this all kind of wives tale that people dyslexic can't read is not true. It does, however, mean that you might take you longer to read, and it might mean that you might not enjoy it as much because of the challenges, but it doesn't mean that you can't or not able to learn. That being said, I love reading, and that's because I do find it difficult. It's like joining bits of puzzles together, but I've had to find more creative solutions. One of those solutions is I listen to audiobooks, but I also have the physical book at the same time. So every time my brain glitches out while reading, it kicks me up the bum and it kind of keeps me up to pace. And you know, you can change the speeding on audiobooks. So I have it really fast, so it really talks like this, and it sounds crazy to everyone else, but I've learned to listen really fast now, if that's a skill set. So I get through books twice as fast. I'm currently reading the book, The Art of Loving, which sounds more like, it is weirder than it is. It's like a science book on human's evolution in terms of how we learn to love. And it's extremely difficult. But my dyslexia is actually meaning that I'm enjoying reading it more because I'm going back through it time and time again and really dissecting it. And I think at the end of the day, people with dyslexia's comprehension is actually stronger because you spend more time processing information and really taking it in. Very interesting. Okay, Yazzo and Ro, it's all like you two, it's the ones to beat. Rosanna, it's not too late to come back. Jay, Godspeed. Okay, true or false? Dyslexics typically don't have a large spoken vocabulary for their age. So depending on whatever age you are, do you have a less vocabulary? False. And again, this is not about not knowing words. Dyslexic people can read the dictionary just like anyone else or listen to words. It's about having the words, and when you're like talking, the brain has to like retrieve that information like in a big filing cabinet. But rather than having the word that you want to use at the bottom cabinet where you can just get the word out, it's at the right top. So it is there, but the little kind of like connections in the brain, they're not as strong. But every time you remember something, those connections get stronger and stronger. And that's why dyslexia isn't something you get rid of or cure, but it is something you can improve upon the negative sides. A fun little fact is when you remember things, you are not remembering, you are remembering the memory. And that's why over time, our dreams, our realities, things like that kind of shift. So older people tend to be a lot more nostalgic for the good old days, you know, oh, I love the war. And that's because they keep remembering like certain aspects, good aspects, and those memories kind of get like overlaid. And dyslexia works very similar to that. So if you remember a word, you just kind of keep adding to it. Oh, Jay has said, I'm here for the ride. Good on you. We'll just call you the winner. But the brain is really interesting. Once you learn how it works, it's far more easier to come up with hacks and workarounds for dyslexia. I no longer consider it a disadvantage for me, but that took many years of researching and finding out how my brain worked in order to be able to say that confidently. Almost there, almost there. 19. Which company has the richest thought to be dyslexic founder? So is it Ford Motors, Henry, Microsoft, Bill Gates again, Heinz, which I believe is Warren Buffett, or Apple, Steve Jobs? So who has the most dosh? Ford, nice. And Henry Ford, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he is the richest person in modern history ever. Like, if you look at like Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, Henry Ford, who essentially invented the car, like revolutionized it, had like crazy amounts of wealth, like billions. Even to this day, he still continues to be one of the richest. Microsoft, he's pretty rich, but he's given a lot of the money back now, which is good. Warren Buffett, he's not really the founder, but he has bought all the companies, and Steve Jobs. Now, guys, I'm just doing the next question. The doorbell's here. Got to pick up my Amazon delivery. Okay, have fun. See guys, you didn't even need me all along. Got my package. Now, author and animal expert Temple Grandin wrote Thinking in Pictures on dyslexia. It's false because the book is on autism. Now, if any of you have autism or want to learn more about autism, it's 100% worth a read. If you're dyslexic, it's also worth a read. She is an animal expert. And so what she has done, she's completely revolutionized how like livestock is treated. And she beautifully depicts how she thinks. I think when it has dyslexia or autism, it can be so difficult to say how your mind works. And while reading this book, I didn't resonate with everything that Temple said, but there was a lot of things she mentioned which made me think, I get it. Another great book which I highly recommend is called Neurotribes. And that again is very much focused on autism, but it is almost a foundation point in terms of learning about dyslexia because it is all interconnected. So that's Neurotribes and Thinking in Pictures. So Temple is not dyslexic, but still a very worthy addition to your knowledge in understanding how your mind works. Yasoda has said, there is also a children's version if anyone is interested. On which one? Or was that a previous question? Thinking in Pictures. Oh, I didn't know that. I'd be interested in seeing that. A lot of these books are fascinating and I've honestly time well spent, but I do find reading a lot harder than others. So that's why audiobooks are all the way. If you sign up to Audible and you say, I don't like this anymore and cancel it, they give you it for half price or they extend it. So you can get it pretty cheap. Nice. Oh, Yazzo, you're smashing it. I wonder why. All right. What character in American television series It's Always Funny in Philadelphia is dyslexic? Is it Frank, which is Danny DeVito, Charlie Day, Mac, or what's the one? Charlie Day. I don't know if any of you guys watch Sunny in Philadelphia. It's a great show. Charlie is always kind of depicted as a bit of an imbecile, but like a really lovable one. And I picked this one as a like who dyslexia representation in TV. They're always depicted as a bit of the stoner, you know, they're kind of like the jokey one. And I just want to push that a little bit because it's something which isn't, when you think of like autistic people, you think of Rayman, you know, like super intelligent. ADHD, really on it. But I don't think dyslexia has as great of a push. No one ever mentions the positives of dyslexia on TV. Like, for instance, Sherlock Holmes with Benedict Cumberbatch, who is depicted as basically autistic, is all the positives. So just keep that in mind when you're watching TV, like how are they depicting it? Do you like the representation? If not, you know, maybe we can do something about it. But regardless of whether I like the depiction of dyslexia, Always Sunny is amazing. All right, it's the last one. 2010 American film Percy Jackson and the Olympians is based on what mythology? He's dyslexic, by the way, Percy. That's how it relates. So Egyptian, Nordic, or Greek, or the other one. It is actually Greek. And it links in to where the origin of dyslexia. So I think it's kind of a nice end. We know that the word dyslexic comes from ancient Greece. And yeah. So those were the main questions. Now let's see who the winner is. Now we are doing really great for time, so we can always have some questions and answers if any of you have them. But let's see how you guys did. So in third place, Rosanna, well done. Roy, very impressive. And yes, Yasora, well done. You guys all did very well, and I'm very impressed with the answers. So interestingly, the ones you guys found difficult was the richest dyslexic founder. The sports one, I don't think I knew who any of them was either. When dyslexia was first founded, I think this one's really important to know the history if you want to know more about it, because for people to understand stuff, it takes a long time. So people's current understanding of dyslexia is so outdated, and knowing the past can help influence how you talk about it in the future. It's like my mum still says, oh, smoking used to be good when I was a kid. Mum, it hasn't been good for like forever. You can't keep using that as an excuse. It takes time for this information to really sink in. So hopefully you found that useful, or a couple little gems or insights, but this is just the very foundation. At Exceptional Individuals, we support organizations, individuals with becoming a bit more inclusive. So if you work at a company, get in touch, and we can always do a talk, a webinar, support, guidance, anything around dyslexia or neurodiversity, which we count as dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. Or if you're an individual looking to get into work or looking to get a better job, then you can also get in touch, and you can come completely for free of charge. And we offer 1 hour support, normally up to 6 sessions. And lastly, we also have events like this and other ones such as Am I Dyslexic, which goes into more of a breakdown of all the characteristics. And we also do ones of how to talk about your dyslexia, so how to come at it from more of a positive view, only an hour of your day. every Thursday up until December, and even some in the next year. So really get involved. Well, I hope you guys had a really good time, and thanks for joining.
Thanks, Matt.